Here's where we are in the governance series. We completed phase 1, seeing the system, letters 1 to 12. We are in phase 2, designing the system, letters 13 to 30. We completed stage 1 through stage 4. We are now in stage 5, preventing regression, letters 24 to 26. We just completed letter 25B, when the executive became the patient. We are in letter 25C, the cost of forgotten alignment. In the previous workshop, we experienced silent drift. We watched an organization gradually drift away from its intended operating model without anyone recognizing it. We discovered that organizations rarely fail because of one catastrophic decision. They fail because small deviations gradually become accepted as normal until the organization no longer behaves as it was intentionally designed. Today, we will continue that journey. Once again, we will use the executive navigation chart that we introduced in letter 25A. Do not simply read this workshop. Participate in it. Imagine you are one of the executives responsible for what happens next. Several years ago, a construction company invested in a new voice over IP, VoIP telephone system. Like many organizations adopting new technology, they wanted their engineers trained so they could properly support the new system. That was the reason I was invited. Training was the door that opened. Over the years, I learned that organizations usually invite consultants through familiar doors: training, security, artificial intelligence, compliance, infrastructure, technology. Those are the opportunities they believe they address. Sometimes those doors quietly lead somewhere entirely different. Before we continue, place yourself in the room. Your organization has invested a significant amount of money implementing a modern communications platform. Management believes the engineers need advanced technical training. The engineers expect advanced configuration techniques, optimization, troubleshooting, expert level discussions. That is what everyone expects. If you had invested thousands of dollars in this training, what would you expect to hear during the course of the training? Hold that thought. Instead of beginning with advanced configuration, I began with something much simpler: the fundamentals. Some of the engineers appeared surprised. A few were becoming impatient. They wanted advanced topics, configuration techniques, optimization. They did not understand why we were discussing something as basic as backups. This has been my experience throughout my career. Whether I am developing expert certification programs, teaching advanced engineering courses, conducting executive workshops, or advising organizations, people usually want to begin with the advanced topics. My experience has taught me something different. Mastery is rarely lost in the advanced topics. It is usually lost in the fundamentals. In martial arts, mastery is not demonstrated by leaving the basics behind. It is demonstrated by continually returning to them. Technology is no different. One of the many features built into the telephone system was scheduled backups. Nothing unusual. Every organization performs backups: storage systems, database systems, security systems, application servers, telephone systems. I asked a simple question: what time do your telephone system backups occur? One of the engineers answered confidently: 2 o'clock in the morning. I asked another question: what time do you bring the system down for maintenance? The answer came back immediately: 2 o'clock in the morning. The room became quiet. If you have been following the executive navigation chart, we have now reached the first stage: experience, an event that allows the organization to reveal something that previously remained unnoticed. Nothing about the telephone system changed. Nothing about the backup system changed. Two simple questions had revealed something no one in the room had previously recognized. Until that moment, everyone believed the backup process was functioning exactly as intended. Now a different realization emerged. If the system is unavailable during maintenance, how are the backups actually completing? Notice what just happened. Two simple questions. The purpose of consulting is not always providing complicated answers. Sometimes it is asking the simple questions no one realized needed to be asked. At that moment, the workshop changed. No one was thinking about advanced configuration anymore. No one was asking for optimization techniques. Everyone was trying to understand what they had just discovered. This is calibration. Something is different than what I believed. The organization believed backups were occurring every night. In reality, they had unknowingly scheduled backups during the exact period the system was unavailable. The backup process had quietly become disconnected from the very purpose it was intended to serve. The next stage of the executive navigation chart is recognition, which allows us to understand the significance of what we have just discovered. Calibration changes how we interpret what we believed. The engineers suddenly realized they may never have performed a successful backup. The company did not know it, neither did the engineers or management. If a system failure had occurred, if hardware had failed, if corruption had occurred, if the organization had needed to restore its telephone system, there may have been nothing usable to restore. Think about the impact of that realization. The company paid approximately $5,000 for an advanced training class. Yet that training may have prevented a future loss measured not in thousands of dollars, but potentially in millions. Not because of an advanced configuration technique, not because of a sophisticated optimization, because two simple questions revealed a condition the organization did not know existed. The company did not hire me to examine its backup strategy. It did not ask for an operational assessment. It did not request an evaluation of governance. It could not. It had no idea one of its most significant organizational risks was hidden inside two independently managed operational schedules. Organizations naturally investigate the issues they know exist. The greatest value often comes from discovering the situations they do not yet know exist. That is why governance assessments are so valuable. They do not simply confirm what leadership already understands. They reveal what the organization has gradually stopped seeing. Referencing the executive navigation chart, the next step is name. Return to letter 13A and identify the structural pattern that best explains the experience. Earlier in the series, we explored silent drift, which asks, are we still operating the way we intended? In the previous workshop, we experienced that pattern through the hospital. The organization gradually drifted away from its intended operating model. Operational behavior slowly changed. The patient experience gradually changed. Leadership continued making decisions based upon an operating model that no longer existed. This workshop reveals a different structural pattern. Strategic drift asks, are our daily decisions still expressing our intended strategy? Silent drift and strategic drift operate at different levels of the organization, have different causes, different signals, and require different design responses. The strategic intent of the organization never changed. The objective was clear: protect the organization's ability to recover and continue operating. At first glance, this appears to be another backup problem. It is not. Backups were never the strategy. Backups were one operational expression of the strategy. No executive ever announced, we no longer believe business continuity is important. No one intentionally abandoned recoverability. Instead, the maintenance schedule evolved. The backup schedule evolved. Each decision appeared reasonable by itself. Ownership gradually became unclear. Authority gradually disappeared. The relationship between the two processes quietly vanished. Eventually, daily execution no longer supported the strategic objective. The organization still believed it was protecting itself. It was not. That is strategic drift. Silent drift changes behavior. Strategic drift changes direction. Silent drift gradually separates the organization from its intended operating model. Strategic drift gradually separates daily execution from the strategy leadership believes it is still pursuing. One changes how the organization operates, The other changes where the organization is actually going. At the beginning of this workshop, I mentioned management believes the engineers need advanced technical training. If you had invested thousands of dollars in this training, I asked what you would expect to hear during the course of the training. I asked you to hold your thought at that moment. Now, compare what you were thinking at the beginning of this workshop to what you are thinking now. Only a few minutes ago, this appeared to be a discussion about telephone system backups. You are no longer looking at a backup schedule. Now, it has become a discussion about organizational strategy. Your understanding changed. That is another calibration. Now we have language for what we observed. You are looking at the relationship between strategic intent and operational execution. That relationship is where governance lives. Once the structural pattern became visible, the next question naturally followed. Now what? Changing the backup schedule would solve the immediate issue, but that would only correct the symptom. Now we have entered the design phase, move from the structural pattern to its design response, and consult the guidance developed throughout letters 13b through 23. The design response for strategic drift is execution, strategy, coherence, which asks a different question. What do we choose to design so strategic intent continues to be expressed through daily execution? The backup schedule was corrected before the class ended. That solved the operational issue. The more important outcome was that the organization began recognizing the need to intentionally design ownership around critical operational relationships. That discussion moved well beyond the telephone system. This is calibration. Now we understand what should be intentionally designed or strengthened. We began discussing ownership, authority, cross-functional responsibility, verification, validation. Who owns a relationship between maintenance and backups? Who verifies that operational procedures continue supporting the strategic objective? Who has the authority to challenge assumptions before they become organizational risk? Earlier, governance may have appeared to be policies, procedures, committees, or documentation. Governance intentionally creates and preserves alignment between daily operations, strategic intent, and execution. When ownership becomes clear, authority becomes clear, verification and validation become intentional. That is the design response. Without that intentional design, reasonable decisions gradually become disconnected. Operational excellence quietly loses strategic alignment. The organization continues working hard. It simply begins working towards something different than leadership intended. That brings us to the final stage of the executive navigation chart, stewardship. Continue guiding the organization within the river, lighthouse, compass, and navigational chart as the organization continues evolving. The purpose of this workshop was never to improve backup procedures, nor was it simply to teach advanced voice over IP technology. The purpose was to demonstrate how an organization can quietly drift away from one of its own strategic objectives without anyone consciously deciding to do so. As stewards, our responsibility extends beyond solving visible problems. Stewardship requires us to intentionally look for conditions the organization does not yet know exist. That is why assessments are so valuable. Organizations cannot request assistance for circumstances they do not know are present. Executives cannot authorize projects for risks they cannot yet see. The consultant's responsibility is not simply to answer the questions that were asked. Sometimes the greatest value comes from discovering the questions no one realized needed to be asked. Training was the visible reason I entered that organization. Governance was the invisible opportunity that emerged. The company believed it had purchased advanced technical training. In reality, it gained something far more valuable. It uncovered a hidden organizational situation that could have remained invisible for years. How do you assign a financial value to preventing an organizational failure that never occurs? How do you calculate the return on discovering a strategic weakness before it becomes a business interruption? Perhaps the answer is that you cannot. The greatest value of governance is often measured by events that never happen, disasters that never occur, customers that are never lost, operations that never stop, recovery efforts that are never needed. Those outcomes rarely appear on a financial statement, yet they often represent the greatest return an organization will ever receive. As you leave this workshop, I would encourage you to ask yourself one question. What strategic objectives does my organization believe it is protecting, while our daily decisions may already be drifting away from expressing them? That question rarely appears on an executive dashboard. It rarely appears in operational reports. Yet answering it may become one of the most valuable governance activities you will ever perform. Because governance is not simply the discipline of managing what everyone can already see. It is the discipline of intentionally discovering what has quietly become invisible before the organization pays the consequence for not seeing it. Thank you.